car. Welcome back. HRC test on 3V development machine. It's his last outing over in the Brno Grand Prix. So Marc Marquez then, about with destiny in many respects. Would ever come at his door after the 4 years, didn't he, of his Grand Prix career. Ducati team, of course, took as well on the end of that 4-year, enjoying himself and then winning as well. Marc does get the championship done here this weekend. But that's where we sit in terms of your championship. 108 of the 37 available. And we will be up with his brother Alex, who's had a superb build-up as far as Alex is concerned, being heavily rewarded. And if Alex will get a significant machine up on a full-spec factory G.
On the fact that he's beaten in the World Champions of Pecco Bagnaia and Fabio Gianantonio this season. He admitted that it is going to change his pre-season somewhat. Of course, he'd been able to just pick up and plug in work to really carry out. He's going to have to carry out plenty of that in the status. It's the kudos of being about the general World Championship season, but he did point out how much it would mean World Championship. That is, of course, another Marc Marquez as he closes in on the World Championship, but good as it gets for them.
Yeah, great news. Test Garage, a very familiar face. His performance this weekend was Ken Kawauchi, Suzuki's GSX-RR project. On 4 wheels, Valentino Rossi, but he still has divided loyalty at 46 T-shirt. And yes, well, it's going to be very, very soon, isn't it? Aren't we, in the Malaysian Grand Prix in Sepang? Let's go down and say good morning to Jack for the first.
Good morning to everybody at home. I have to say, on a bait already was searing down on us, something which feels normal for a Japanese grab. Nakagami's machine is a bit the rear seat unit. It is completely to put something within that seat. The fact that it's on both machines and it is radical. Nakagami, we've spoken a lot whilst on with that, the new swing arm, the carbon swing at last, as we anticipated it would be. Bike has been crying out for them ever since the summer break. And Luca Marini, and just finally, and on the Yamaha M1 has remained the same. Miguel Oliveira, Jack Miller, and lost unit on the rear of those M1s, which I think format with this inline 4 is pretty much them, and credit to them that despite only having exhaust system is there on just one of the keep waffling on. A lot has been mentioned about by Sky. It is continuing on back to the 2024 swing arm continued on with here in Japan.
Jack's interesting tech updates. It's down hard. I think it was turn 7, wasn't it? 10, turn 11 though. Turn 10 on the graphic. 5 podiums in the last 7 Grand Prix.
Went down quite early, didn't he? Didn't get anywhere near to the fortunately for Bez. He was straight up on his feet. Bez ready to resume this session nominally well to push Marc Marquez for victory. Of course, having handed Bezzecchi in many ways, you could argue it was a forced error from confidence that he carries, taking a bit of a dent somewhat.
Marco Bezzecchi barely had the energy to throw his, and he really wanted. He pushed Marc all the way. Bez and Marc said it was Marquez, who always has something like a sort of a braking severity scale, don't they, on the year, even tougher than the Burra. Braking from 310 kilometres an hour. The front brake temperature gets up to around to judge your braking marker. It's downhill.
And it's why Michelin have also gone, Ken. They've actually gone a step harder than they were even near his now, of course, for this weekend to cope with the very specific tyre limited circuit. This is exactly the same as they were. Put a lot of emphasis on for Pecco Bagnaia's prospects, given how much
tough layout. This, aside from the fact it's got so many hard brakings, has the most gear changes on the Grand Prix calendars. The riders are going to be changing gear around Honda all the way back in 1997, and Honda are really starting to points in the last 3 Grand Prix, points work Honda are doing behind the scenes. A one-day test, they flew him all the way out to 133. I think Lace described what makes it exciting. Indeed, here, this sort of European battering they've been on the receiving. And of course, Lewis as well. We know that Fabio Quartararo V4 powered M1 at the Mazzara.
Wasn't exactly glowing in his praise of it. Yamaha, it's still in a rather embryonic phase. Quartararo has already been very clear that the be central to his long-term look now at Marco Bezzecchi's descent into turn.
And that was almost when the rear came back in low. Down Marco goes. Yeah, thankfully Marco is just going to slide into the gravel trap. And rider, he's going to get picked up now by, you sort of see they're trying to tuck in his arms. Gravel, as we pick up some key rider, including, of course, 15th place for Chantra.
Still very Chantra, who were expecting news very speed rider for next season, as we follow him. But yeah, Chantra, he absolutely dominated this whole position. So perhaps if there is one circuit on the MotoGP,
he's got 3 banker tracks. You've got right here in Motegi, and you've got crowd, so stop and go circuits to round out what looks like is going to be a very for Mark as he chases down a P1 depth discussion there with his crew chief Marco inside that factory Ducati garage.
How's the morning back in Europe? Well, that's not going to put you off your sleeps. Marc Marquez currently third, speaking to Marco Rigamonti there, and he's handling how he wants at this very early stage.
Dropping low coming out, isn't it, as far as Marc Marquez is concerned? As we mentioned, of Repsol Honda, he was able to win the World Championship round cigar. I think they've come from Peru to well done. That is awesome. That's why MotoGP support their heroes. Peru to Japan.
15,000 kilometres they've covered to prove to be. Here's the young man trying to ensure that next weekend, but you've already seen the maths. Championship tomorrow in the sprint. It will go to Sunday, whatever Sunday is, finish ahead of Alex. Even Alex's result on Sunday to win.
Also hasn't he, Luca Marini? He clearly has. Form has moved Luca up to 12th moment in the standings. That's a couple of places over in Misano. Joan Mir. 20 Grand Prix that Mir has seen the checker flag in. It's not exactly a starting, but he did DNF in both the sprint and the Grand
crash involving Mir, but reading between the lines, and Marco crash trying to avoid the third. Already had some problems with his front end.
Yeah, and that's a big problem when you haven't got the whole shot. The first time you've got to experience turn 4 with that whole shot. Of course, I did here. Of course, we're still very much in the Michelin test riders in Misano on Tuesday. That's interesting out of space. I forgot about this. Was planned and prepped for 2027 was access and ride-on devices, which will be banned 2026, but beyond as we head in Motegi. Well, let's take on the championship. 8 points is now behind Pekka Bagnaia.
Yeah, he does indeed. And as you're saying, it happened exactly. Probably
since the start, it was. Yesterday already he said that he liked this track layout in the last years, but quite dependent to the ride to the track. But we hope to.
It's down to coming from Misano, where as he's ever been, and then suddenly he comes here.
Yeah, for sure. After Misano, for sure, and also for that his confidence is raising up. The new weekend, different layout. So we start exactly with many races that we did good setup. We are now we are trying to keep working as to the next session. To be during the Friday, but new mentality. We are.
And he said, "My pre-season is over now." That extra hunger from Jorge for these.
It was a very of the MotoGP Championship, and with the number 1. So.
Jack, thanks as always to a pretty boss Paolo Benori here previously. Best of 5th, of course, this weekend, which Pekka Bagnaia, when you consider where Pekka Bagnaia has been, or just to see himself anywhere near the top of 6, 7, so far the only rider that's found keep Morbidelli. Luca Marini.
Oh, crash number 2.
Bezzecchi's gone down again. This has been an absolute nightmare. Front end wash out at turn 5. 2 of the down at P5. I was just about to say there was 4V off. Real poor start to the weekend as far as Bez is.
Turn 11, followed now by turn 5. Listen then, down to second gear this morning's session, because that first bike he trashed down to the box and get to work on that one. Otherwise, he might
get a little bit of weight off the front tyre. Has got off to a shocking start. Let's go down to Jack once again.
I put it to Paolo Bonora just a second ago, and he had in the front end at Misano. He said, as a...
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Happy memories of very wet Moto3 race, but his most recent turn 5. Yeah, the best fans can go Bagnaia. Well, you don't need to be a body language expert.
Can we go back to what I had on run 1, please? Heading back to the box. They'll start the work on it, but they're not going to be getting that other motorcycle to get back before there's any open.
Bezzecchi really has been the only resistance to Mark's domination. I think Mark touched upon this and in Misano, where he went toe-to-toe with, where he's given his mechanics a couple of apologies. We know that Marco's a top lad. I'm sure he's with how it's all sort of gone so spectacular into the 44s for the factory Ducati squad. Mark and splitting the 2 Ducati.
Going back to something much more similar to the settings he had on third and upwardly mobile in 55 Ks into the right-hand course, turn 11, where we've already seen Bezzecchi through. He now passes under the oval circuit. Now left and right into the final sequence. Similar to what he's done already, to 45.3.
So far this year for Frankie. I think he was just relieved to have a stern pre-Mazzano warning from the FI water. Well, the penalties, the sanctions have been out. Why it's gone so wrong for him so far. It was the first of his 2 spills this morning. Kilometres an hour to just under 90. Just behind Fabio Di Gianantonio. Yeah, Marco and 5. Power back on there. Down. Not really enjoying his Japanese Grand Prix.
It's into the top 10 on a 45-7th. As once again we see some animated Marco Rigamonti. It's proved quite although he's now ahead of his teammate Pecco Bagnaia. But
special weekend in store. Chance for him, of course, a dream come true in many respects, to where in Moto2 in recent years. Second in his last 3 starts. Also here last year as he moved clubs, a different ball game when you tackle
place, although as you did see there on the rear combination, which will explain in part why he's rocketing
style, isn't it, for Chantra, where he just as well so good in front of his home crowd in Borough. Looks like the partner Jake Dixon, the Honda's the bad 125 and 250cc rider back in the day board, out on a lot. Bagnaia have clearly rectified some of these control of this FP1 session. We'll track Marini in that 4 sector, but what about Bagnaia? Is he 14, elbow kissing the curb there? 144.8. Which does.
As he sees himself relegated down to, before we truly start to talk about quite some time, probably have to go back all the way to Assen. Just looks a bike that he's much more good in locking and just not that confident. Still, he hasn't changed his rear tyre, the front slick tyre at this stage of proceedings.
Yesterday, 2025 feels like it's been to Marc Marquez steamrolling toward weekend here in Japan. Just keep your rider. So Bagnaia from making big gains as Honda make. Jack Miller's in 6th place for Prima Pramac Yamaha in 2022. The 145.4.
We've already heard an experimental machine at Taka Nakagami's time. They do put new parts on those factory Honda. Collaborated and corroborated well down in the shores. So much of the testing also takes place. Still an awful long way for them to go to be back to where they on a Honda, and they haven't tasted an awful lot of success.
The average start to this Japanese Grand Prix for He's got to go a long way down the order to find this after his left shoulder injury in sack at the moment. And Fermin Aldeguer, of course, transition has been quite a tough one so far for the 5. He's dead last in this session. He's just his Aldeguer, the only rider actually in the.
It was never a good track this for Aldeguer in his Moto2. Consideration that he doesn't go well on close 2nd place, as the other oppression has also returned, and you can't exactly see him. He's perhaps more importantly, I guess, going to miss.
Now his side of the factory Aprilia garage of the crashes at turn 11 and turn 4. How much so? Well, he's done 7, and when you look at how much track time it has, seat time on a MotoGP bike around his home, 14-15 lap margin. So really, as Jorge Martin jumps into 3rd, world champion for how much longer? Martin then up into 3rd flat. Encouraging signs. Standout weak point for Martin on that Irish. Never an issue for him at all when he was on the Ducati.
In race trim on board that Aprilia.
On trying to maximise his pace on actually he needs 2 completely different putting in for the race itself, but then they've had to that they'll implement for the bike in the final close there, where it was very much just swing his leg over it, lap together for the Aprilia. Far more particular.
Yeah, thanks Jack. He could get better here for 3rd rider that finds a lap in the 44.3
here last year, and of course Kez was trying to keep an eye at Bastianini. Miller is the top Yamaha at the moment in 7th, 10th place. Yellow flags around again though in the. It is indeed an eye at Bastianini.
And some confidence, we've got somebody else down now. Morbidelli's. Now, is that connected, or they both had their trap? As Morbidelli, yeah, complete.
Afterwards, there were no yellow flags waving there, so Jack Miller.
Austin, wasn't it, earlier on this year, who actually lost a lap. Then it could be same story there as far as Morbidelli's concerned. His crashed Ducati, so a rather dramatic on the floor.
Shades also over Q2, but no time at all to react. The yellow flags came out before Jack Miller also entered the same close. Checkered flag now joins the lack of red on our timing screens. It is going to be a free.
Thankful that he's unlikely to get a trip to the stewards off after getting busted. €2,000 for Nation, he said, on the rider parade on Sunday. I want to decline it.
Show that to an
taste of the kept up his end of the bargain. He said, I'm sure he took it all in good spirits. Did you?
The next season, but Pecco Bagnaia tweaked to his Ducati on his 2nd run, didn't this morning. Still so early in the week for the Ducatis this morning, and Davide Tardozzi's reject.